Hey gang, it's Mary Rose here. It's so nice to be live with you. It's 1 p.m. Pacific time on a Wednesday. And if I could have your undivided attention for a moment, today's topic is focus. Focus. Another word that raises feelings in us. Listen, all writers struggle with focus. Ask me how I know. Focus, focus, focus. We are creative people, we writers, and we're flooded with ideas. We're also human beings, which means that our lives are flooded with responsibilities, right? And so we've got too many ideas and we've got a million things to do, and we just are trying to get through the day, and it just feels like we're buried in it all. How do we find or create that magic golden circle of focused effort in which we can actually write, get our work done? Now, listen, there's a lot of advice out there about how to focus, but it's not just about shutting off the notifications on your phone or skipping social media. Not that these are bad ideas, but there is more to it than that, in my opinion. And that's really what I want to talk about today. I think that learning how to create that zone of focus is absolutely essential to being productive as a writer. I hope you agree. And I will look forward to hearing what you have to say about it in the comments, as always. So please stick around as I break this down for you. Before we get started, let me introduce myself. I'm Mary Rose Wood. I am a writer myself. I'm best known for writing middle grade fiction, although I've written a lot of other things along the way over the years. And I'm also the founder of Path of the Storyteller, which is my own platform for teaching and mentoring writers. I go live most Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific time to talk about story structure, writing craft, and the mindset of the working writer. And these are the constant preoccupations of writers at every stage in development. And we dive into a lot of this stuff every week in the Path of the Storyteller program and in the Storytellers Circle, which is a special alumni group for writers who've been through the Path of the Storyteller program. If you want to find out more about that, you can always hop over to the Path of the Storyteller website. And what I want to encourage you to look for, of course, is to help yourself when you're over there on the website to go get yourself a free download. It's a collection of writing prompts, and you can find it here at www.pathofthestoryteller.com/challenge. I'm going to talk about these again a little later because it's pertinent to this idea of focus. But this is just a little freebie, a little something that you might find really beneficial, because these writing prompts are designed to walk you through story structure. From beginning to middle to end, an essential topic for all writers to master. So, and let me also say hello to the folks who are here watching live. Some of you are already leaving comments. Bridget, hello. I'm really glad you're here today. Hillary, lovely to see you. Anne, great to see you here. I would love for you all to let me know in the comments what your concerns, questions, challenges, and solutions to this ongoing topic of focus might be for the benefit of the discussion and the benefit of your fellow writers. Hey, Nancy, lovely to see you. I'm really glad you're here. All right, let me dive into this topic. And I want to start by talking about eavesdropping, which is something that I think all writers should make a practice of, frankly. Eavesdropping in coffee shops, cafes, and restaurants, it's something that all writers must do, because what great material we can find. And this happened to me just yesterday, not kidding. And I was sitting in a local coffee shop and I was thinking about what to talk about on today's live stream. I was trying to focus on that question. Okay, what should the topic be today? I wondered. What would be of benefit to the community of storytellers that joins me every Wednesday? So ironically, I'm really trying to focus on this question. And what do you think happened? The voice of a young man at the neighboring table distracted me. It interrupted my focus. And so I found myself listening to what he was very earnestly telling his companion. And he was talking about his passions, and they were artistic passions, so I was like, oh, maybe there's something for me to glean from this young man so full of the heat of fervor as he's sharing his vision of his life with this young lady, maybe trying to impress her. Who knows how these things go? But he was talking about acting and about his passion to be an actor. He was also talking about modeling and his, desire to work as a model. And, he was a nice looking fellow, so more power to him. Then he was talking about his private bartending business and how that was really, on the precipice of really turning into something. And then he started talking about a fourth thing, and I honestly can't remember what it was, which I think is fine. It doesn't matter what it was. And he finished up his talk about his vision for his life and his goals. And he looked at her and he said, "I'm just going to focus on those four things. Oh, and my music too," he added. So when I heard this fellow say, "I'm just going to focus on those four things," I knew right away what my topic was for today. And that's how we've come to this idea of focus. But when he added the fifth thing, his music too, then I just, burst out laughing because I thought that was just comedy gold. The fifth thing, comedy, comedy, comedy. So I want to address this dear young person just in a very unlikely chance that he ever comes across this YouTube video and recognizes himself in my anecdote. You talented young person, you talented actor, model, private bartender, and something else, plus music too, full of hopes and dreams. If you are listening to this, I have news for you. And I say this with love. The word focus does not mean what you think it means. When you say, "I'm just going to focus on these four things, plus a fifth one," that means that you are not focused at all. All right? You're not focused on anything. If you can say, "I'm just going to focus on these 4+1 things," you're not focused on anything. All right. Now I want to unpack this before anybody gets upset or starts hyperventilating, because I know that you have already done 12 things today. So have I. So let me just look at this idea for a minute, and then we're gonna expand on it. There is a saying, I love a good wise saying. This one I checked to see, and it is sometimes attributed to the Chinese philosopher Confucius, and it is sometimes called an old Russian proverb. So it's got to be good if everyone's claiming it. Here's the saying: "Chase 2 rabbits and you will catch none." There's a lot of truth in this. I think we all know what a target looks like. If we were archers and if we were, pulling back the bowstring and we had an arrow lodged in our bow and we're aiming at the target, how many bullseyes are on the target? There is only one, my friends. There is one bullseye on the target. That is what we are aiming at. And if we think that we can hit more than one bullseye at once, we are not going to hit any. So this is the nature of the true meaning of the word focus. It's the one rabbit we're chasing. It's the single bullseye on the target. That is what it means to focus. If you have a camera, then you want to use the word focus in that sense, right? You choose the focal point. It's singular. You zoom in on it. You adjust the focus so there's this perfect spot where the focus is, fully executed. That's where the image is clearest and most delineated. We can't focus on multiple things at the same time. If we are paying attention to multiple things at the same time, that's what we're doing, but we can't call that focus. We cannot call that focus. So let's exhale. And I already see that Cynthia is absolutely aligned with the point that I'm making and I'm about to dig deeper into. She says, "Right now I'm eating lunch, texting a friend, emailing my sister, and listening to you. Oh, and working on my work in progress." Cynthia, I am so aligned with this. And I know that your fellow writers out there are saying the same thing. And we can allow ourselves to get discouraged if we don't examine this further, which I want to help you do right now. We feel this must be terrible news, right? It's very disheartening if the only way that we can succeed and really reach our potential as writers is that chase one rabbit, have one bullseye, focus our energies in the true sense of the word, just the one thing, because life is not like that, right? And it's very easy to start falling into as a way of thinking that says, well, see, my life is not set up for success. I don't have the circumstances that would allow me to really be successful as a writer because my life is so full of fill in the blanks. I'm overwhelmed with various responsibilities. I have a lot of relationships that I have to tend to. Maybe I'm a caregiver. I work full time to support myself. Maybe I work full time and a half to support myself, right? We don't know what circumstances other people have, but we look at our own and we say, there's no single rabbit here. There is no one bullseye. How am I supposed to be successful as a writer if what you're telling me is that I have to find that unity of attention? My life is not going to permit it, right? And so it feels like just kind of devastating news. But the truth is that this is the way life is for the vast majority of people. And I want to share another image with you now that I've referenced the actor, model, private bartender / musician, plus the one thing I can't remember, and the wisdom of Confucius and an old Russian proverb. It seems only fair to now quote a yoga teacher of mine. So my life is filled with a multitude of references. I hope yours is as well. Because there were a lot of traditional yoga practices. I was studying yoga with this wonderful yoga teacher. I still study with him when I can. And there's a lot of traditional yoga practices that involve like go sit in a cave for 40 days and 40 nights and hold your breath for an hour and, levitate. And I'm exaggerating a little, but there are some yoga practices that are just extremely intense. And you think, well, who could really do that? Practice silence for 90 days or, I'm sort of making things up, but things very outside the realm of the everyday life that most of us live. And and yoga students would become very intense about it. And they say, I really want to make progress. Should I do this? Should I quit my job? Should I, leave my family? Should I go live in a cave somewhere? And he very wisely would say, look, these texts were written when people could go be gurus, when people could live a monastic life. And there has always been this kind of monastic tradition in most spiritual practices or many spiritual practices where certain people renounce the everyday life. They renounce the pleasures and burdens of everyday life and they go and they live in a cave or they stay in a cell or they choose a very constrained life just so they can dedicate themselves in this singular way, this focused way to their practice, whatever it may be. And you probably can think of examples, if you were raised in any particular kind of spiritual practice or have one that you currently are engaged with, there's probably a tradition somewhere of a sort of monasticism, right? An extreme commitment in a sense to just say, I'm going to do that and I'm not going to do everything else. And you can probably even think of artists in the history of art who seem to have had this kind of extreme engagement with their work. And this is where the image, I'm tempted to say the cliche. It's not really a cliche, but it is a kind of an archetype of the sort of mad artist solely fixed on their work, ignoring all of the everyday responsibilities and pleasures of life, where that comes from. Does it mean that we should require this of ourselves? Well, no. My yoga teacher would say, look, there's the monastic tradition. not just in yoga, but in all these other things. But there's also within yoga a tradition called the householder tradition. And the householder is the person who is of the world and who has a family and runs a house and, earns a living and does all the things. And there are certain practices that are for the monks. And then there are other practices that are for the householders. And this is perfectly correct. Not everyone should or need feel that they need to be part of the monkhood, the monastic tradition of singular focus on the work, whether it's spiritual work, artistic work, whatever. So I just want you to know that you can be a householder and still have a full practice, right? And now we're going to toggle this back to writing, because then the question is, all right, so I'm juggling all these things like a circus act. Where does the idea of focus, of chasing the one rabbit, of hitting the one bullseye, where does that come in? Where does that come into play? And I would say that one way to think of it, and I'm going to break this down further in a minute, but one way to think of it is that we can only shoot one arrow at one bullseye at a time. That's just truth. That is what it means to focus. That's what gives us a chance of actually hitting the target. But we can also shoot multiple arrows in a day. We're not just given one arrow per day that we're allowed to shoot. All right? So let's break down this idea of focus and see how we might make the best use of this practice, this householder's practice, of knowing that we've got to shoot multiple arrows every day, that each arrow can only have one target, and that our best chance of success is just focusing on that one arrow while we're shooting it. Because if we're thinking of this arrow hitting this target at the same time we're planning the next arrow and the next target, we have lost our focus. All right. Now, the thing about focus, when I started to think about it and see how I could break it down, is that it does have a singular quality, but it is not one thing. It seems to have two ingredients to me, once I really ponder it, that in order to focus, we have to allocate our time, right? And we also have to allocate our intention. So, attention. Attention and intention are rather the same thing. If we set aside time to shoot our arrow, that's good, right? But if we don't have a target, we can shoot that arrow. We've set aside 10 minutes to shoot the arrow, but we don't have a target. So we're not going to hit anything. We're not going to make progress. We're not going to achieve anything. So we have time, but no attention. And if we have a target, if we have the intention, but we don't set aside the time to actually shoot the arrow, we still don't have focus and we still haven't made any progress. So you need both of those ingredients. You need to be able to manage your time, and you also need to be able to manage your intention, your target. All right. Now, if I say today, I'll work on my book, that includes both of those ingredients, right? Because today is a unit of time. And I'll work on my book is a unit of intention, right? It has a target. But the problem with both of those is that they are much too big. They're just much too big, right? When today are we going to do it? Now, anybody who's investigated like using a calendar or establishing a routine, making a habit of writing, layering it into your day, stacking your writing habit on top of other habits that are well established. These are, part of the science of habit formation advises us to do this. If we want to add a new habit, just kind of sew it onto something that we already do. So it becomes kind of a piggybacking on a habit that we already have that makes it easier, right? Removing obstacles to, all the usual things about habit hygiene, turning off the notifications on your phone and all that other stuff. if we do that, we can find like the time. We can manage the time. We can block it out on the calendar. I got a color coded calendar that looks like a box of crayons. I've got things that I do. I just do so many things. I'm chasing so many rabbits every day that I just make each one a different color so I can look at my calendar and I can say, oh, okay, there's all of those different things happening. Managing the calendar is familiar to most of us, right? We sort of all know by the time we're adults how to tell time, how to schedule something. I have a dentist appointment at 10:30. Like I know when it is, I know where to be and what to do. This is just an adult skill. Some people do struggle with the executive function, but most of us at least know how to do this. Keep a calendar, block out the time to do something, be realistic about it. And so the piece of focus that has to do with allocating time is the one that writers tend to obsess about. Oh, I don't have time to write. When am I going to write? Oh, I didn't get to write today, And they talk about that one a lot, but that's really the easy one because most of us know how to manage a calendar, right? So if you can manage a calendar, you can allocate pieces of time. And they don't have to be big pieces of time. They can be small chunks of time. A half an hour, maybe 15 minutes, 30 minutes is a little chunk of time, but you still can block it out, give it its own color on the calendar. So I don't think I really need to spend too much time telling you how to do that. No pun intended. Here's the part that's challenging is choosing the target. Most people know how to manage a calendar, but writers, generally speaking, have to learn how to break the process of writing down into tasks, individual tasks, setting up all the many targets that you have to hit in order to be able to bring a work, let's say a novel length work, because most of my students are working on novels. It's not one target. It's so many different targets that you have to hit. When you say, my goal is to write a book, it's almost a meaningless statement when it comes to the idea of focus, because you cannot sit down in your half an hour of allocated time and write a book. So here's the part of focus that I really want you to consider. Break it down into, chunks in the calendar, but identify the target in a way that is achievable and the amount of time that you have allotted. This takes having an understanding of the writing process. And there's so much to it. And, I've often said this, right, in the past, that one of the things we have to get over when we first sit down to write is the idea that writing is just a single act, that I sit down and the writing comes out of my fingers. And then when I'm done working, I've written. That's not what the actual process of writing is like. Take it from me and take it from each other, because I know many of you who are here have experienced this. What task are you going to accomplish in this focused chunk of writing time? Is it something really small, like writing an opening paragraph that establishes who your protagonist is and gives a feeling about what might be amiss in their lives? Maybe it doesn't identify it fully, but gives a feeling that this is a character whose situation is ripe for change. Can you do that in a paragraph, right? Can you play with that idea of, I'm just going to try to come up with an opening paragraph that accomplishes those two things? Who's the main character? And in what way can I plant the seed that my reader's going to know, oh boy, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen to this character, right? Something's about to happen. A story is about to begin. That sounds like an extremely specific task, right? Work on a paragraph with the intention to play with these two objectives. Who's the main character and what's wrong? A half hour spent playing with that would be really fruitful. It would be really fruitful, right? What's another task that you might set up? Well, we break the whole writing process into two big chunks of activity. One is drafting and one is revising. So when you're drafting, the kind of exercise that I just came up with, it could be really helpful if you're still trying to work out who your main character is or what might be wrong. Maybe when you're drafting, you might also just focus on exploring the main character's world. Who else inhabits it? What are the key settings of this world? Where do they live? What does their room look like? How do they occupy their leisure hours? Play, improvise. It's drafting, right? That's what you're doing. And so you might say, well, today I'm going to spend a half an hour thinking about, if let's say this main character has a bedroom in a family home. What does it look? What's in there? What kind of things do they like? That's a really specific task. It's a target you can hit in a small amount of time. Nice. If you're drafting and you understand a little bit about story structure, which I strongly recommend, and it's one of the reasons, let me just bring this back. It's one of the reasons that I encourage you to download these writing prompts, because what it's going to give you is a collection of tiny little tasks that you can undertake. But they're tasks that are going to add up to story structure. So if you haven't already gotten these writing prompts, I strongly encourage you to go help yourself. It is just a freebie. You can download off this link. You need to be able to give yourself fruitful tasks. And if you don't have a good sense of story structure, you are not going to be able to give yourself tasks that are going to lead to anything. You're going to end up in a kind of an endless invention zone. And this is not helpful, right? This is just a form of generating material that doesn't have an end goal. So one of the reasons that focus is difficult, and I'm going to say probably the main reason, is that it requires us to aim at very particular targets. But if we are early in our writing journey and we don't have enough story structure craft under our belts, we don't know what those targets are. And so when we say we can't focus, or we sit down to work and we're not sure what to do, or we just kind of randomly scribble things and we soon see it's not adding up to anything, and we start to imagine that, if only we were in the monastic tradition and not a householder, I'd be able to think more clearly about this. It's all so scattershot, and this could only be because of our, distractions. It's not so. We're just not giving ourselves like the right tasks. We're not able to line up a series of targets, a series of bullseyes to aim our arrow at. As long as we're only shooting one arrow at a time at one bullseye, we have perfect focus. That's all it needs to be. But we need to be able to choose the target. And that is, that to me is the key to focus. It's the key to focus. We can sit and just noodle and keep ourselves busy because we have not given ourselves a target. We haven't picked which rabbit we're chasing that day. So this is a very different way of thinking about focus than looking at our lives as a piece and saying, there's too much going on, I can't focus. That's not it at all, right? It's about setting aside even a modest amount of time, which I trust that you all can do, but also knowing how to give yourself a target each time you sit down to work and how to make those targets useful. They have to be very small, very specific. They have to be focused. You literally cannot sit down to quote unquote work on your book, because in saying that, even if you don't realize this, even if you're saying it naively, What you're saying is, I'm just gonna focus on these 400 things. That's what it means to say I'm gonna work on my book. It means you're focusing on everything all at once without even knowing what those things are. There's a lot. There's just a lot. So there's story structure, and there's sort of mapping out all the things that have to happen in the beginning of a story to set you up so that you can plan out a middle of a story, right? So that you can actually build up to a satisfying ending. That alone has multiple specific targets that you will get to aim at. And those writing prompts will help you with that a lot. But we all know that that's only the beginning, right? Because once you've got that draft, you need to revise. Once again, when you sit down to work, you can't say, well, I'm just going to focus on revision, because it's like saying, I'm just going to focus on these like 300 things. Revision is a lot of different tasks. It involves many different things, and they're not, rocket science, but you do have to know what they are so that you can choose. We had a really fruitful session just last week in our Storyteller Circle, the alumni group for the Path of the Storyteller program, where we took a hot seat submission from one of our members, and we looked at it holistically, but then we also took the time to really break it down, to look at a couple of specific sentences, see what words might be cut, see how the openings of a few sentences might be adjusted so that they had different rhythms, and just worked a lot better, didn't feel quite like so locked into a repetitive sentence structure. Really particular things. It's like it's like painting miniatures at that point, right? You're not doing the side of a building in a mural. You're looking really closely, and you're pausing, and you're going very slowly, and you're saying, this word is almost right, but it's not quite right. What word would be the right word? What would express what I'm saying here? In my draft, it's like 7 words. I think I could say it in 3 words, and that would be great because it would pick up the pace. It would be more satisfying for the reader, for me to stay ahead of them, not let them get ahead of me, right? Keep them like drawn forward through the writing, as opposed to the writing playing catch up with stuff they've already figured out. So it's really beneficial to the reader if I compress my 7 words into 3 words. Maybe there's a better way I can say it. Maybe I've said the same thing like 2 or 3 different ways. Can I just choose the best one and cut the other 2? Can more be said? Am I overusing dialogue? Perhaps I've got a conversation that the characters start talking with a certain amount of chit chat, like, hey, how are you? Nice to see you again. I didn't expect to run into you here. Nice weather we're having. Oh, by the way, did you hear there was a murder? Like, we can cut the stuff before, did you hear there was a murder? We can get rid of that. It's not helpful to the storytelling. It's not interesting to the reader. Let's get on with it. Now so I'm just throwing out examples. These are off the top of my head. This is the kind of work that we do all the time together in the Path of the Storyteller program and in the alumni group. But I'm offering it as examples of how specific your target can be in revision. When you can just say, I'm going to look at this one little section, and the target that I want to hit today is compression. I really want to be strict about whether I'm using not only too many words, too many syllables. Maybe I'm using a lot of multisyllabic words where I could say it all quite clearly in 1-syllable words. That tightens it up right there. 7 1-syllable words goes by a lot quicker than 7 3-syllable words. From the reader's perspective, the pace is vastly improved, even though it's the same number of words, right? So we have to have a good toolkit so that we know what targets are at our disposal and which targets basically have to be ticked off the to-do list before the book is ready for the reader. So to me, focus is not about distraction. It's not about our social media addiction. It's not about the kids tapping at the door. It's not about our day job. It's not, I mean, fill in the blank. It's not even about the fact that we've got 3 other book ideas, in the folder on our laptop waiting for us to look at them. If we have the skill set to have a target in front of us when we sit down to work, we're not gonna have trouble being engaged with shooting this one arrow, because it's one arrow and it's one target, and we can do that. And if we do that consistently, we will make progress. We will make shocking amounts of progress. We really will. So what holds writers back from doing that? To me, it's simply the mistaken notion that writing is a magic thing that somehow does itself. If we put our behinds in a chair, that the writing is somehow going to happen. And it's not so. We are the archers. We really are. It's up to us, right? To have all of those arrows in our quiver so that we have a lot of shots that we can make, and that each arrow is really targeted, and that we know what that target is, and then we can execute it, and we can get so much done in a really concise amount of time without having to, white knuckle our way through or feel frustrated at the end. Oh, I sat here for 45 minutes and I didn't get anything done. If you shot one arrow and you hit one target, you got a lot done. And that is a kind of, it's like a cycle of virtue, it's like a wonderful wheel of progress that becomes a source of momentum. Because I really just want you to imagine what it feels like to sit down, even if your life is super busy, to sit down for a little while every day or most days, take out, your project, have enough knowledge, enough skill, enough writing craft, enough knowledge of story structure to be able to make a good decision about what the target of the day is. Take out your arrow, shoot it, hit the bullseye. You are going to be so satisfied, and you're not going to be able to wait to do it again. And so then you can see how this starts to be like a wonderful magnetic process that just keeps you drawn back to the writing chair, because it's every time you sit down, you win. It's a little dopamine hit, you have the reward of success, and you will be drawn back again and again and again and again. And this is where the progress will just, amaze you. So much of our reluctance and what we describe as our lack of focus is because we sit down to work and we experience failure. Who wants to go back for a second helping of that? So this is what I have to offer you today. It's really about time and attention. It's about understanding that you can only shoot out one arrow at a time at one target, but you do have multiple arrows to shoot. You don't need to be in a perfect situation where life has been, quieted to a point where nothing can distract you. It's not about distraction to begin with. It's about knowing what your targets really are. And, if you're a beginner or you haven't had training, you don't even really know what I'm talking about when I talk about story structure and writing craft, that's okay. That's a beautiful place to be. But you just have to commit to learning. You have to get a little bit more expertise under your belt. And again, that will also offer you a cycle of success, because when things start to make sense that felt random before, as you realize how much control you have over your own creative process, your own productivity, your own output, your own growth as a writer, you're going to be eager to get to work. It's just going to draw you to it. So many things will just dissolve. These ideas of procrastination and I don't have discipline, that self-doubt, it really loosens its grip on you once you have a nice, practical, clear way of working that makes you feel every day like you hit the bullseye. That's what I wish for you all. That's what I wish for you all. Now, I am going to just, in conclusion, give you a little validation, I suppose, that all writers at every level of their careers juggle a lot, and the fantasy that somebody who's maybe published a lot of books and, has a career at a certain level that we might find enviable, that somehow their life is like, I'm in my writing cave and my assistant brings me a sandwich and I don't have to trouble myself. I have somebody to deal with all my stuff for me. It's not like that. It's not like that. And I'm not only speaking for myself, but for a lot of, very successful friends of mine who, inhabit the highest levels of success and notoriety, people that you've heard of, they are all juggling a ton of projects, plus their personal lives and their family responsibilities. And it's just a universal condition. So, don't be thinking that having an assistant and a housekeeper and a trust fund are all prerequisites for success, because it just never happens that way. It's just not a thing that's true. And I want you to remember, I'm laughing at Bridget's comment, which I'll bring up in a minute. I want you to remember there really is no such thing as multitasking. This is a myth. And that when we switch tasks, when we switch from one thing to another, it costs us some energy. It is kind of mentally exhausting. And I think the imagery that we've been using today, if you could think of it as the process of, oh, I took my arrow out, I chose a target, I aimed, I shot, I hit the bullseye. It feels really good. But it doesn't mean that you're necessarily prepared to just shoot another arrow. You've got to reset, you've got to choose a new target. You've got to set up a fresh bullseye. You've got to, take a moment to choose a new arrow. You've got to set yourself up again to do it again. We don't just go seamlessly from one thing to the next. There is this like reset process. And this is just how our brains work. Maybe you need a snack. Maybe you need a nap, right? You definitely need a little break. And so I also encourage you to be discerning about how many arrows you need to shoot every day. Because if they're not super important, maybe you can pare things down a little bit. But just know that the break is essential, because if you don't reset and you just try to keep shooting new arrows at new targets, you're going to just miss. You're going to just start to miss. You know this, right? So that's the takeaway here. Like, break it all down into these little bits. Choose the one arrow, choose the one target, execute, enjoy the success. Let it remind you how much fun it is to come back next time you come back. But then take a break, like know when to stop, and include rest as part of the things on your calendar that you need, because you need it. You need it. There's no white knuckling through when we're working with our creative capacity. If our mind is tired, there's nobody to fill in for us. This isn't a job we can phone in. As writers, we really have to be present. We kind of have to be at our best just to do the work. And so don't be afraid to stop when you're ready to stop, and prioritize your rest and self-care. It's really important. Now, listen, I'm going to put this up, Bridget, because it really made me laugh. When I was talking about, having someone bring me sandwiches and somebody cleaning my house and my butler delivering things, Bridget goes, "What? That's not your life, Mary Rose?" Bridget, I hope you're not going to lose your respect for me now, to know that in fact is not my life. I'm not sure I would want it to be. But my day, like yours, is filled with a wide mix of targets that I have to hit. Some of them are super fun, and some of them involve cleaning up after my cats. You know how it is. We've all got lots of stuff to do. That's what I've got for you today. So if you're going to sign off now, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you found this this content of benefit, I would love to have you as a subscriber. Get that downloadable. There's a link in it in the description box below. And please give the video a thumbs up if you found this content of interest. It's really helpful to me. I'm going to take a moment now to look at the comments. And I think that Anne is sharing Something really relatable here. She says, I think a householder writer is more likely to make me feel seen in their storytelling than the average monk. Maybe the latter is more harried, but so am I. Isn't that wonderful? She means the former. She corrects in the next message. And I think that's so great, right? Because what you're saying here is that the experience of the writer as a harried householder is going to create a story that you as a reader are going to be more likely to resonate with, because the emotional truth is something that you understand, something that you're going to recognize as true. Yeah, I like that. I really like that point, that it's the truth of our experiences as writers, juggling all the things. That if we're honest about it, we look at that stuff and put it in our work, your readers are having those same lives out there, and that they're going to feel that we're telling the truth about life, and it's going to make them really appreciate, right? It's going to make their feelings activate as they feel seen and understand that this story gets them, it's a really, and Anne uses this expression in her comment, this feeling seen, the feeling of psychological visibility, I think is a technical term for it, is so rewarding. It's so rewarding in our real lives, but it's one of the things that we love in the books that we read. If we read something and that makes us feel seen, like how did this writer, whom we've never met, maybe who has been dead for 100 years, right? I mean, this is the thing about books. They last so long that we can have these intimate experiences of connection with a book that was written before we were born, by a writer who's long dead. And yet we can feel so seen. And it's because they are telling the truth. They're telling the truth about how life is and what it is to be a person. And if they're telling the truth, we're going to feel it. And we have to strive to do that in our work too. All right, my dear storytellers, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate your presence live. If you're watching the replay, I appreciate that too. You can always keep the conversation going in the comments below. I get notified when people leave comments, and I always pop in to answer. Tell me about your struggles with focus. I would love to know more about it. Your solutions, if you found some, if you try to apply this idea of choosing little targets, how that goes for you. And I hope that it really makes a difference, as you go through your writing days, even though your writing days are also days that include so many other things. Tell the truth about it. Your readers will appreciate it. All right, gang, I look forward to seeing you next time. As ever, if there's something you want me to talk about in a live stream, just let me know. Leave a comment. I love your suggestions. Sometimes sitting in a coffee shop is all it takes, but I like to hear from you as well. Be well, everyone. I'll see you next time.